Captain Lisa Turner had never imagined that the day she returned from her last mission would mark the beginning of a battle unlike any she'd faced before. For years, she had been a frontline soldier, leading her team through some of the most dangerous combat zones the military had to offer. She was known for her courage, her sharp instincts, and an unbreakable will that carried her through countless firefights. But now, on this quiet morning, the Army had reassigned her not to the field, but to a desk job at the base headquarters. The order came unexpectedly, almost like a whispered secret that no one wanted to explain. Lisa sat in her small office, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead replacing the roar of helicopters and distant gunfire she was used to. She stared at the stack of paperwork in front of her, the ink on the forms feeling heavier than any weapon she carried. It wasn't just a change of scenery. It was a change that felt like erasure. Every file she touched, every report she processed, reminded her of what she'd left behind. Her team, the missions, the adrenaline rush of moving through uncertain territory, all gone. She felt invisible, as though her years of service and sacrifice had been wiped clean with a careless stroke of a pen. The uniform still hung on her frame, but it felt like a costume now, a shell, without the life she'd poured into it. She couldn't understand why the Army would sideline someone like her. Had she made a mistake? Was there something she didn't know? The questions circled in her mind, relentless and unforgiving. She tried to keep her head down, to do the job she'd been given, but the silence of the office was deafening compared to the chaos she'd thrived in. Outside her door, the base was alive with soldiers preparing for their next missions, their boots echoing down the hallways. Lisa's footsteps, once purposeful and confident, now felt slow and uncertain. She missed the weight of her gear, the camaraderie of her unit, and the certainty of a mission's purpose. This desk job was like a prison without bars. Her colleagues offered polite smiles, but avoided the questions she desperately wanted to ask. No one spoke openly about her reassignment, and the whispers in the corridors grew louder. Some wondered if she'd been injured in a way she hadn't disclosed, while others speculated about trouble she'd never faced. None of it was true, but the rumors cut just as sharply as any bullet. At night, Lisa lay awake, replaying every moment of her last deployment. She remembered the faces of the people she'd helped save, the tension before every patrol, and the unspoken bond between soldiers who knew what it truly meant to survive. How could she explain to anyone that her removal wasn't her choice, that she still felt the soldier inside burning bright even as the world seemed to forget her? The days blurred into one another. She learned to navigate the maze of bureaucracy, filling out forms and attending meetings that felt meaningless. Every request to return to the field was met with vague answers. It was as if the military wanted her to fade into the background, to settle into a quiet life far from the risks and responsibilities she had embraced for so long. Despite the frustration, Lisa never gave up. She refused to let the desk job define her. In the moments no one was watching, she sharpened her skills through online training and stayed connected with her old unit, offering advice and support whenever she could. But deep down, she knew this was a battle she couldn't win alone. Her story, hidden behind closed doors and silent hallways, was waiting for someone to uncover it. Someone who could see past the paperwork and the reassignment orders. A person who would recognize the true soldier beneath the desk job. Until that day came, Lisa Turner waited, determined to prove that courage isn't measured by where you serve, but by the strength you carry inside. Every morning, Lisa Turner arrived at the base headquarters with a heavy heart. The sharp clatter of boots, the buzz of radios, and the camaraderie she once thrived on were replaced by the quiet hum of office machines and the low murmur of conversations about schedules and reports. She sat at her desk, staring at a screen filled with endless spreadsheets and forms, feeling trapped in a world that was as foreign to her as peace was to a soldier in combat. She longed for the adrenaline, the sense of purpose, the brotherhood of those who shared her battles. But here, behind a desk, the only battles she fought were with bureaucracy, paperwork, and the creeping doubt that began to gnaw at her confidence. Every time she filled out a form or filed a report, it felt like another nail in the coffin of her identity as a soldier. Lisa kept her frustrations to herself, but they simmered beneath the surface, like a wound that wouldn't heal. She watched as younger soldiers, fresh from training, prepared to deploy while she sat in silence. Some of her peers had already accepted their desk assignments as a necessary part of their careers, but Lisa was different. She had faced danger head-on and survived. She wasn't ready to be sidelined. The whispers around her grew louder with each passing day. Rumors circulated that she had been injured during her last mission. Others speculated about disciplinary issues, and some even suggested that she wasn't up to the task anymore. None of it was true, but the damage was done. Those whispers spread like wildfire, eroding the respect she had worked so hard to earn. Lisa's silence only fueled the rumors. She didn't know how to defend herself without sounding bitter or desperate. She worried that speaking up might confirm the doubts others had about her. So she endured the loneliness, the isolation, and the sense that her service was being erased. Despite it all, Lisa refused to give up. She used every spare moment to keep her skills sharp, studying tactics and military strategy online, reviewing training manuals, and watching videos of recent missions. She stayed in touch with members of her old unit, offering advice and support from afar. It was the only way she could stay connected to the world she loved. One afternoon, Lisa overheard a conversation between two officers in the hallway. They spoke quietly, but their words cut deep. "She's lost her edge," one said. "Maybe she's better off here, safe behind a desk." Lisa's hands clenched into fists. Lost her edge? She had faced down death more times than they could count. This was not safety. This was exile. That night, lying in her small quarters, Lisa wrestled with her frustration and doubt. She knew she wasn't broken. She was still a soldier. But she also knew that proving it wouldn't be easy. The Army was a vast machine, and she was just one person caught in its gears. Her thoughts drifted back to her last mission. The heat of the desert sun, the distant crackle of gunfire, the weight of responsibility as she led her team through hostile territory. Those memories fueled her determination. She vowed to herself that she would find a way back, that she would remind the Army who she really was. But how? Who would listen to her story when even her closest comrades seemed to believe the rumors? The silence around her was suffocating, and she began to wonder if anyone would ever understand the truth. In the days that followed, Lisa kept her head down, doing the work expected of her. She answered emails, filed reports, and attended meetings, all while planning her next move in the quiet recesses of her mind. She knew that the path back to the field would not be handed to her. She would have to fight for it, just as she had fought in every battle before. Then, one day, a new face arrived at the base, a man with a reputation for fairness and an eye for talent. Colonel James Harper was known for cutting through red tape and seeing the real story beneath the surface. When he noticed Lisa, something about her caught his attention. Unlike the others, he didn't look away or dismiss her as just another desk worker. Lisa felt a flicker of hope for the first time in months. Maybe, just maybe, someone would see her for who she truly was, a soldier still ready to serve. But first, Colonel Harper would have to uncover the truth hidden beneath the paperwork and rumors. And Lisa would have to be ready to fight, not with a weapon, but with a story she'd kept buried for too long. Rumors had a way of spreading fast on the base, especially when no one talked openly about what really happened. Lisa Turner could feel the weight of every whispered conversation as she walked down the halls. Soldiers glanced her way, some with curiosity, others with doubt or pity. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was a mystery, a question mark in uniform. They say she got hurt bad in her last mission. One soldier murmured to a friend in the mess hall. "I heard she's never going back out there." Maybe she wasn't cut out for it, another whispered, shaking his head. You don't get reassigned to a desk unless something's wrong. Lisa overheard these comments more than she cared to admit. Each one felt like a punch to her pride. None of it was true. She had returned without injury, without any marks against her record. But the silence that followed her reassignment spoke louder than any explanation ever could. She had tried to explain herself once to a superior officer who asked why she looked so restless. But the words caught in her throat. How do you explain that you feel invisible? That being sidelined felt like a betrayal? She didn't want sympathy. She wanted the truth to matter. But here, truth seemed to be the first casualty. Her old team members were careful not to make eye contact when they passed her. Some had accepted her reassignment without question. Others felt awkward, unsure of how to bridge the growing distance. Lisa understood they didn't want to get caught up in the rumors, and she didn't blame them. She spent her days alone, stuck in a cycle of paperwork and meetings, while her mind replayed memories of patrols through rough terrain, midnight raids, and the quiet moments before a mission began. Those memories were both a comfort and a torment. They reminded her who she was, but also how far she had been pushed away. The base felt like a different world now, a place where bravery was measured in signatures and schedules instead of courage and sacrifice. She watched soldiers arrive with bright eyes, ready to prove themselves, while she sat waiting for someone to see past the surface. Then, one afternoon, the arrival of Colonel James Harper changed everything. He was a tall man with a commanding presence and a reputation for fairness. Unlike many others, he didn't look at Lisa with judgment or doubt. Instead, there was a spark of recognition in his eyes, as if he could see the story she hadn't told. Curiosity got the better of him, and he began asking questions, quiet, thoughtful questions that suggested he was ready to listen. He asked about her missions, her experiences, and her reasons for being here behind a desk. For the first time in months, Lisa felt like someone was trying to understand her, not just label her. But not everyone welcomed Harper's interest. Some officers were wary, uncomfortable with anyone digging into personnel decisions that had already been made. There was resistance, subtle but real. The military bureaucracy was a maze, and Harper was stepping into a part of it many preferred to keep hidden. Lisa watched as Harper started to dig through her records. She didn't know what he would find, but a part of her hoped he would uncover the truth she'd kept quiet for so long. The missions that tested her limits, the moments when her decisions saved lives, and the quiet heroism that never made it into official reports. Meanwhile, the whispers around the base continued. The rumors didn't disappear, but now they were joined by questions. Who was this soldier reassigned to a desk? Why was a colonel taking such a keen interest? And most importantly, what did she really deserve? Lisa felt a mix of hope and anxiety. The path ahead was uncertain. If Harper found what he was looking for, it could change everything. But if not, she might remain trapped in this shadow, a forgotten soldier with no voice. Her story hung in the balance, waiting for someone to tell it right. And for the first time, Lisa believed that someone might be Colonel Harper. Colonel James Harper wasn't a man to be easily satisfied with surface answers. The moment he met Captain Lisa Turner, he sensed there was more beneath her quiet resolve than anyone had bothered to see. Her eyes carried a story, one of battles fought and courage tested. But something in the way she held herself told Harper that she wasn't where she belonged. Harper began his own investigation, quietly reviewing her file. The paperwork was thick, filled with dates, locations, and mission codes that few understood. At first glance, it looked like a routine career reassignment, the kind often made to balance personnel or for health reasons. But Harper was no stranger to the Army's behind-the-scenes complexities. He knew these official reasons sometimes masked deeper truths. As Harper dug deeper, he discovered something remarkable. Lisa's service record wasn't just filled with routine deployments. It was a chronicle of some of the most dangerous and covert operations in recent years. missions in hostile territories that didn't make the news, nighttime rescues under enemy fire, leadership roles that demanded split-second decisions, the kind of service that most soldiers only dreamed of. Harper's brow furrowed as he read. How could someone with such a distinguished record be reassigned to a desk job without explanation? How had the system overlooked her? It wasn't just a clerical error. It felt like a betrayal. A soldier like Lisa deserved recognition, not sidelining. He decided to meet with her again, this time with purpose. In a quiet conference room, away from prying eyes, Harper looked Lisa in the eye and said, "Captain Turner, your record is impressive. Tell me, what really happened that led to your reassignment?" Lisa hesitated. She had carried the weight of her silence for months. But now, faced with someone who believed in her, she began to open up. She spoke of the last deployment, the grueling months in the desert, the close calls, the leadership challenges. She told him about the mission that had changed everything, the one that had put her in the crosshairs but wasn't officially recognized. Harper listened intently. He didn't interrupt or judge. For the first time, Lisa felt heard. The frustration, the loneliness, the sense of invisibility, all poured out. She told him about the whispers, the doubts, the isolation. She spoke of the struggle to prove herself in a system that seemed to have forgotten her. When she finished, Harper nodded thoughtfully. "You've been fighting battles off the field as well as on it. That's not right. You deserve better." But Harper also knew that changing things in the military wasn't simple. The bureaucracy was slow, and old habits die hard. He would have to push hard to right this wrong, and he was prepared to do it. Over the following days, Harper began making calls. He pulled strings with his contacts in the command chain, presenting Lisa's case not as a complaint, but as a call for justice. He emphasized her valor, her dedication, and the mistakes that had led to her being sidelined. Word began to spread that a high-ranking officer was championing Lisa's cause. Some welcomed the news, hoping it would restore fairness. Others were skeptical, wary of shaking up the status quo. But Harper was undeterred. For Lisa, this renewed attention was a mix of hope and anxiety. She didn't know what the future held, but she felt a spark of possibility. Maybe she could reclaim her place on the front lines. Maybe her story would finally be told. Harper visited her again, this time with a firm promise. "I'm going to make sure your service is recognized, and I'll fight to get you back where you belong." Lisa looked at him, a slow smile breaking through the weariness. For the first time since her reassignment, she dared to believe that the fight wasn't over, and that victory might still be within reach. Days passed like a slow march, each one filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Lisa Turner found herself watching the hallways of the base with a newfound sense of purpose, wondering if today might be the day things would finally change. Colonel Harper's promise echoed in her mind, but she also knew the military was a machine built on rules, protocols, and resistance to change. The whispers around her hadn't stopped. Soldiers and officers alike were watching closely, waiting to see if the colonel's interest was just a fleeting moment or a real turning point. Some had already started shifting their opinions, quietly rooting for her comeback, while others remained skeptical, believing she was destined to remain behind that desk. Harper worked tirelessly behind the scenes. He wasn't the type to make grand speeches or public displays. Instead, he moved carefully, gathering allies and presenting Lisa's case with facts, testimonies, and undeniable evidence of her bravery. He spoke of missions where Lisa had saved lives, of decisions that had prevented disasters, and of leadership that inspired others to follow her without hesitation. The turning point came unexpectedly. During a high-level meeting, Harper laid out Lisa's record in front of senior commanders. The room was filled with stiff uniforms and serious faces, but Harper's words cut through the formality. He detailed the injustice of sidelining a soldier of Lisa's caliber and pressed for her reassignment to active duty. For a moment, the room was silent. Then questions began, some supportive, some doubtful. But Harper was ready. He answered every concern with clarity and conviction, refusing to let bureaucracy hide the truth. It was a rare moment where the system was forced to confront its own mistakes. Lisa waited outside the meeting room, heart pounding. When Harper finally stepped out, he met her eyes and nodded. "They're considering it," he said. "This isn't over yet, but we're moving forward." The days that followed were a blur of anticipation. Lisa was called into meetings she hadn't been invited to in months. She was asked to share her experiences, to brief officers on the realities of frontline service, and even to train younger soldiers. It was a reminder of the skills and knowledge she still possessed, skills that no desk job could erase. But not everyone welcomed her return. Some officers remained quietly resistant, their doubts hanging in the air like shadows. Lisa sensed their skepticism and knew she'd have to prove herself all over again. It was a new kind of battle, one fought with patience and perseverance rather than weapons and tactics. Then came the day when the official orders arrived. Lisa was to be reassigned to a special operations unit preparing for a high-risk deployment. The moment she read the memo, a flood of emotions overwhelmed her: relief, excitement, and a fierce determination to make every second count. Her colleagues in the office congratulated her, some with genuine warmth, others with barely concealed surprise. Lisa smiled, but inside, she knew the real challenge was just beginning. On the training grounds, surrounded by soldiers preparing for the mission, Lisa felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. The weight of her gear, the sharp commands, the tight-knit camaraderie, it was all coming back. But this time, she wasn't just fighting for survival. She was fighting for respect, for recognition, and for the right to define her own story. As the deployment date approached, Lisa stood tall, ready to lead once again. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, and that the scars of being sidelined wouldn't vanish overnight. But she was prepared to face whatever came her way, armed with the knowledge that she had been seen, heard, and finally understood. In the quiet moments before the mission, Lisa thought back to the months she spent behind that desk, the loneliness, the doubts, the whispered rumors. They had tried to write her off, to make her invisible. But she had refused to disappear. Now, as she prepared to step back into the field, Lisa Turner was ready to show the world that courage doesn't fade when you're pushed aside. It only grows stronger. The morning sun barely peeked over the horizon as Captain Lisa Turner stood with her new unit, the weight of her gear settling comfortably on her shoulders. The scent of fresh earth mixed with the quiet murmurs of soldiers preparing for the mission ahead. For months, she had waited for this moment, a chance to prove not just her skill, but her resilience. The briefing room was tense, filled with hushed conversations and the rustling of maps being unfolded. Harper was there, watching quietly from the back, his presence a quiet reassurance. The mission was dangerous, high stakes and uncertain terrain, but Lisa felt ready. More than ready. She had carried the burden of being sidelined for too long, and now she would carry the responsibility of leading her team through whatever came next. As the plan was laid out, Lisa's mind sharpened. Every detail mattered: the timing, the route, the communication signals. Years of experience flooded back, her instincts kicking into gear. This wasn't just another deployment. It was a chance to reclaim her identity, to remind herself and everyone watching why she belonged here. The journey into the field was both familiar and new. The sounds of the forest, the crunch of boots on leaves, the distant calls. It was a language Lisa had spoken for years. But now, there was a different fire inside her. The fire of someone who had been underestimated and overlooked, now determined to prove her worth beyond any doubt. Challenges came swiftly. The terrain was tougher than expected, with hidden dangers lurking beneath every shadow. Lisa's leadership was tested when a sudden obstacle blocked their path, a collapsed bridge that forced the unit to find a risky detour. She stayed calm, guiding her team through rough terrain with confidence and quick thinking. Nightfall brought a chilling silence. The team set up camp under the stars, nerves taut but spirits high. Around the fire, Lisa shared stories, not just of the mission, but of perseverance and strength. Her words resonated with the soldiers, many of whom had faced their own battles, seen and unseen. It was a moment of bonding, a reminder that courage was not just about facing danger, but standing together through hardship. But the real test came unexpectedly. Midway through the mission, their unit was ambushed. The sudden eruption of gunfire shattered the quiet night, and chaos ensued. Lisa's training kicked in instantly. She shouted commands, coordinated defensive positions, and moved through the battlefield with precision. Her calm under fire steadied the team, saving lives and turning a potentially disastrous situation around. As the skirmish ended and the dust settled, Lisa looked around at her team, exhausted but alive. The respect in their eyes was unmistakable. She wasn't just their leader, she was their backbone. Back at base after the mission, news spread quickly. Harper received reports praising Lisa's leadership and bravery. Slowly but surely, the doubts that had shadowed her name began to fade. The whispers of the past were replaced with stories of her courage, determination, and skill. Lisa herself felt a profound shift. The months of isolation and doubt hadn't erased her. Instead, they had forged her into something stronger. She wasn't just the soldier who had been pushed to a desk job. She was the soldier who had fought her way back, who refused to be defined by others' assumptions. In the quiet moments, away from the bustle, Lisa thought about the journey that had brought her here. The battles fought both in the field and behind closed doors. The loneliness, the rumors, the frustration, and the unexpected ally in Colonel Harper who saw her truth when no one else did. Her story was no longer hidden. It was a testament to resilience, to courage that doesn't fade even when forgotten. And as Lisa prepared for the next mission, she knew this was just the beginning. She had reclaimed her place, not just in the army, but in her own life. And nothing would ever take that away. The aftermath of the mission brought a quiet but powerful change to the base. Lisa Turner's return wasn't just noticed, it was celebrated, quietly but unmistakably. The soldiers who had once glanced her way with doubt now looked with respect. The officers who had questioned her abilities had begun to reconsider. And for Lisa, the most important change was within herself. The battle to prove her worth had shifted from external struggle to quiet confidence. But the journey was far from over. Being back on the front lines meant new challenges, both physical and emotional. Each day tested Lisa in ways she hadn't expected. The memories of being sidelined lingered like shadows, and sometimes the weight of proving herself all over again felt overwhelming. Yet she pressed on, knowing that every step forward was a victory. One afternoon, while training with her unit, Lisa noticed a young soldier struggling with a difficult maneuver. His frustration mirrored the feelings she had once known all too well: doubt, fear, the pressure to live up to expectations. Without hesitation, she stepped in, guiding him patiently, sharing advice born from experience. In that moment, she realized her role was about more than just leading missions. It was about inspiring others, showing them what resilience looked like. Word of her leadership spread beyond her immediate team. New recruits sought her out, wanting to learn from someone who had faced setbacks and come back stronger. Lisa embraced the role, knowing that her story, her real story, had the power to change lives. She wasn't just a soldier. She was a symbol of determination. Yet, not all battles were fought in training or on the field. Back at headquarters, Lisa continued to face the subtle resistance of those who doubted her return was permanent. Some whispered that her reassignment was temporary, that sooner or later she'd be pushed aside again. Those doubts stung, but Lisa refused to let them define her. Colonel Harper remained a steady ally. He made sure Lisa's contributions were recognized in official reports and pushed for her inclusion in important strategic meetings. His support was a reminder that leadership wasn't just about rank. It was about seeing potential and standing up for what was right. One evening, after a long day of training, Lisa sat alone, reflecting on how far she'd come. The journey from the quiet desk job to leading troops in the field had been painful and humbling. But it had also been a profound lesson in patience, strength, and the power of never giving up. Her thoughts drifted back to the whispers, the doubts, the rumors, the isolation. They had tried to write her off, to silence her story. But instead, they had fueled her determination. Each challenge had made her sharper, more focused. She understood now that true courage wasn't just about facing danger. It was about standing firm when the world questioned your worth. As Lisa prepared for another deployment, she felt a quiet confidence settle over her. She knew the road ahead would have its difficulties, but she was ready. Ready to lead, ready to fight, ready to prove that her place in the army was earned, not given. Her story had come full circle, from being reassigned to a desk job and forgotten, to reclaiming her position with honor. Lisa Turner was no longer just a soldier. She was a leader, a mentor, and a testament to resilience. And as the sun set on the base that evening, casting long shadows over the training grounds, Lisa stood tall, ready for whatever came next, knowing she had already won the most important battle of all. The day had arrived, the moment Lisa Turner had waited for through every doubt, every whisper, every sleepless night. As dawn broke, she stood with her unit, the weight of her past and the promise of her future resting on her shoulders. The mission ahead was one of the most critical the base had seen in years, and all eyes were on the team. But most of all, they were on Lisa. The air was thick with anticipation. This wasn't just another operation. It was a chance to cement her place, to show that she belonged not because of orders or favors, but because of skill, leadership, and unbreakable spirit. She looked around at her team, men and women who had come to respect her not just as their captain, but as their guide through danger and uncertainty. The plan was complex, requiring precision, quick thinking, and absolute trust among the soldiers. Lisa had spent countless hours studying every detail, training relentlessly, and preparing her team to face the unknown. But even the best plans could unravel, and she knew the real test would come in the moments when things went wrong. As they moved out, the terrain was harsh, rocky hills, dense forests, and unpredictable weather. The soldiers moved quietly, communicating through hand signals and hushed whispers. Lisa's senses were heightened. Every sound, every movement was a clue, every decision a potential lifesaver. Suddenly, the stillness shattered. Enemy forces appeared, springing an ambush. Gunfire erupted, and chaos exploded around them. Lisa didn't hesitate. She shouted commands, organized defenses, and led counterattacks with unwavering resolve. Her voice cut through the noise, steady and commanding. The battle was fierce and unforgiving. Bullets whizzed past, explosions rocked the ground, and the air was thick with smoke and tension. Yet, amidst the chaos, Lisa's leadership shone brightest. She moved through the battlefield like a force of nature, calm, decisive, and fearless. Her team followed her without question, their trust in her absolute. At one critical moment, a soldier was caught in the line of fire. Without hesitation, Lisa risked everything to reach him, pulling him to safety despite the danger. It was a moment that could have cost her life, but it showed exactly who she was, someone who never left a comrade behind. When the dust settled, the mission was a success. The enemy was repelled, and the team returned with their objectives achieved. Exhausted but victorious, Lisa and her soldiers knew they had faced something greater than any one person. They had faced the truth of loyalty, courage, and sacrifice. Back at the base, the news spread quickly. Reports praised Lisa's bravery and leadership, and her name was finally spoken with the respect it deserved. The whispers that had once tried to diminish her were replaced with stories of her courage, her determination, and her unyielding spirit. Colonel Harper greeted her with a proud smile. "You've earned every bit of this, Captain," he said. Not just because of what you did today, but because of everything you've endured to get here. Lisa nodded, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in months. The journey from a sideline desk job to leading troops in battle had been long and hard. But it had forged something stronger inside her, a resilience that no setback could break. As she looked around at her team, at the faces of those who had fought beside her, Lisa understood that this was more than a victory in battle. It was a victory over doubt, over silence, and over the limits others had tried to place on her. Her story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to every soldier who had ever been underestimated, every person who had ever been pushed aside and told they weren't enough. Lisa Turner had reclaimed her place, not just in the military, but in history. And as the sun set on the base that evening, casting long shadows and golden light, Lisa stood tall, ready for whatever came next, knowing that she had already won the battle that mattered most, the battle to be seen, heard, and respected.